We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It is Saturday, and Saturday means that Ed's going to join us. And Ed, we've had a long run of guests on the show, a lot of great guests, but people are always anxious to hear from you, and we've got some shit going on. So I'm anxious to get this started. How you doing, Ed?
I'm good. I got my shovel. I'm ready to dig in and throw that stuff.
Not literally though. You're a
Not
man in your
literally, no.
you're a man in your 70s. You ain't shoveling anything.
No, no, that's why I'm here instead of shoveling snow in Minnesota.
Yeah, no shit.
Although that snow is looking a lot more attractive than the inbred Trumpkins I have to deal with around here. So
The thing is, it's about noon here in Minnesota in the summer in August. You'd be surprised to hear this. The temperature is 61.
perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good
Uh,
weather.
I had to wait till the sun went down last night to mow, and it was still like 88. So,
Wow.
yeah, how about that?
As I get older, the heat takes its toll more. The cold I fucking hated since I was born, but the heat
Yeah.
is hard. As I get older, I'm more particular about my weather. Mid 70s, low 80s, anything beyond that, I'm bitching.
Yeah, anything that has good weather's been bought up by the oligarchs, so we're screwed. You're
Yeah.
going to have heat and cold and all of that stuff just because we do. You know, the I
The
want to touch on Chevron at some point here.
Well, let's do it. Let's do it now. We got a lot of shit to talk about the
All
press
right.
release and our press conference stuff. We'll talk about that. But the Chevron stuff, I'm glad when you bring that up because that's one of the things I don't know nearly enough about. So I'm always anxious to hear what you have to say about it.
All right, what it comes down to is the regulatory agencies, the EPA and so forth, up until this decision, have been pretty much given carte blanche to rule on matters of pollution. If there's a coal mine that's dumping their coal ash in the river and it's affecting everything, then the EPA could step in and say, no, you can't do that.
Right.
The same with all of the other pollution and different safety hazards and so forth that business is prone to creating and then trying to ignore and forcing people to live with and so forth in the name of profit. That's why the regulatory agencies were created, okay, to ride herd on this kind of corporate malfeasance. Well, the Chevron case was brought to the Supreme Court to basically say, screw these experts who know all about this that are in the regulatory agencies. We're going to let judges decide, which
Right.
is if you look at the Dodd decision with in relation to women's health care, it's essentially the same thing. It's saying, nah, doctors don't need to take a look at this. I mean, the Supreme Court basically just said
Right.
no, it's the courts, not the doctors who know what they're talking about, who can decide whether or not a woman needs emergency care or not. No, we have the judges setting this timeline that you can't mess with or you go to prison. I mean, it's insanity. It's
Right.
plain insanity. In that case, it is plain insanity when you deal with pollution, too. Judges don't know crap. Most of them are appointed because of political loyalty or something like that to one party or another. Doesn't mean they're smart. It means they managed to get through law school somehow. And they have no expertise. They don't seek it out. They're going to rule in favor of the business in most cases. And
Right.
that's what we're stuck with now for the momentarily. And that's why we have to get behind Harris and Walz, get them in there, keep the Democrats in there so that we can adjust the court because that's what's happening. All of these are purely political decisions that have been in the works for years, cases that have been making their way up just so they can appear at exactly the right time for a Gorsuch or an Alito or whoever to do their bidding because they're bought and paid for and they're political hacks. That is our court. That's what the Chevron decision is. That's what Dodge was. It's nothing but political. Look at a court. Anytime you have every decision being a 5-4, you know it's politics.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. We hadn't talked since Kamala Harris has chosen her VP candidate. And she, of course, picked Tim Walz, governor of Minnesota. I'm a Minnesotan. You're a former Minnesotan, maybe going to be a Minnesotan again. Were you surprised by that pick? I wasn't. I kind of was feeling that vibe for a while, for a few days.
I was feeling the vibe for the better. Pardon me, I'm a little hoarse this morning. Let me work it out here. I was feeling that vibe for at least a week, and
Really?
apparently, if you look back, this was not an accident. I think Tim saw that this opportunity might come up. He and his advisors and so forth, way back in the fall, because
Yeah.
he started elevating his national profile, raising funds for other people, making himself available to various political meetings in other states and so forth, and appearing on TV and speaking out and so forth. So he was increasing his national profile. So he was getting ready. And then coming up with the weird thing and just really clicking with Kamala, I think, is what it came down to. We talked a little about it last week, and neither of us wanted to make a prediction, but I was feeling it then. So were you,
Yeah.
and turns out we were right. And I think it's a great decision based on what we're seeing here.
I kind of get the impression, I talked about this before in the podcast. The Republicans are always trying to game the system. They want to discredit Joe Biden, and then Joe Biden steps aside, and they go, wait, 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 wait. We had no idea Kamala would have this kind of attention. And I think they were doing the same thing with Josh Shapiro. They had
Oh
a
yeah.
campaign to knock him out of it. And when they did, they thought, oh, we won. And then they bring in Tim Walz from Flyover Country, and they go, oh, we got this one. And then they find out there's just as much excitement behind him as there is Kamala Harris. They keep fucking up every time, but I think you're absolutely right. Tim Walz has probably a chemistry with Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden obviously have a very tight relationship, and I think she wanted the same thing. And if you look at Tim Walz, he is kind of like a younger Joe Biden.
Yep.
Joe
Very
Biden,
centrist.
yeah, very centrist, in spite of what they're trying to make him look like. Uh, and he's and Tim's more outgoing, of course, than Joe Biden was. But when you look at the past 4 years when they've both been in office, they both got a lot of shit done with a thin margin in their respective legislature or Congress. They're guys that get things done. So he seemed like a good choice when it was all said and done.
Yeah, Tim is a throwback to a time in this country when both Republican and Democratic politicians got that largely on personality.
Right.
It wasn't just the money back then. You had to start small and work your way up and make a lot of friends along the way on both sides of the aisle. So that when you wanted some legislation passed, not only would you talk to your own party, but you would talk to your guys on the other side and you do
Right.
some horse trading. And that's the way the government worked so well from about the mid 40s to about the 1980. We didn't have this demonizing everybody on the other side just because you don't agree on the fine points of something.
Right.
We were able to create the best time this country has ever had for white people. I
Yeah.
will say that. But it did, minorities started to do better after about 1963 for a while before the pushback started. But the minorities got in on at least a part of the good stuff before it all went south. Now, and I noticed that that's the way people are seeing Tim. I think as he's almost America's papa,
Yeah. Yeah.
if
Exactly.
you will, and he's not even that old
No, he's not.
comparatively.
No, he's the same age as Kamala Harris, and people are amazed by that. And he's 4 years younger than me, and probably 10 years younger than you. Uh, but
Right.
but you're right. He is a throwback in terms of having a personality. If you look at the lot of young politicians, they have some have a little bit of personality and some throw out zingers now and again, but they're all kind of cookie cutter in the sense they have the same temperament.
Yeah.
And sometimes you need somebody to stand out like that, even go retro in the case with Tim Walz. And I think that after the 4 years of Donald Trump and the 4 years beyond that with Joe Biden, I think people see in Kamala Harris and Tim Walz people who are bringing joy back, bringing hope back,
Yes.
and at the same time, capable of fighting back too. I think it gives them both sides, and that's why people are so excited.
Absolutely. And I think they see a freshness in both
Yeah.
that would not have been there. Joe would, as great as Joe was at his job, and as much as he got done, he never had the flash. He never had the feel good thing going quite as well. We saw him as capable, or at least those of us who were smart enough to see what he was doing, saw him as capable, saw him as dedicated, saw him as a nice guy, all of the things that you want in that kind of person. But he did not, he still was part of the past. So is Trump, for that matter. So is
Yeah.
anybody that the parties put up that you've seen a lot of. Now, Kamala's been around for a long time, and she's done a lot, as Attorney General for California and so forth like that. But as vice president, people tend to disappear to a certain degree. So
Right.
she's fresh and she's got a personality, which is really, really good because the personalities that we see that politicians have largely cultivated of late are nasty people. And
Yeah.
I'm going to say that almost on both sides. In that the Democratic side, we have our Raskins and so forth who really stick it to the Republicans. And Kamala is capable of doing that, but it's not her go-to, if you know what I mean. She's far more positive than that. The Republicans, they're your Hawleys and your Ted Cruzes and your Jim Jordans. All they are is people to stir up stuff. They don't
Right.
do any legislating or anything like that. The other thing that both Walz and Kamala have is they can address policy, and they have specific policies that they want to bring forth and that they can talk about. Trump has none of that. He has no
No.
policies.
No.
He's got 2025, which he's running away from as fast as he could. Those are the true Republican policies, of course, which is rolling back everything, all positive legislation that happened in the second half of the 20th century. That's their platform. When you get right down to it, those people in Florida and Georgia and South Carolina probably are a little dismayed to look at Project 2025 and see they want to get rid of the National Hurricane Center. They don't want to do away with NOAA and all of the things that help us, and also the recovery process. They want to do away with sending in government funds and low cost loans and so forth after a disaster. That's all going away under 2025. You didn't know that. You do now.
You know, you mentioned that a lot of people are seeing Tim Walz as a dad or papa or whatever you want to call him. And I think that's true. There was a quote I heard, and I've said it on this will be the third podcast, but I think it's very poignant. And I'm curious as to get your reaction to it. And I don't remember who made the quote. They say they think that people are rallying around Tim Walz as kind of a father figure because there were a lot of fathers like him that were stolen away and brainwashed by the likes of Rush Limbaugh and Fox News. These guys that would have been like Tim Walz got sucked into the cult of personality, which is MAGA. And these dads that these kids once had have them no more because they're angry and they're racist and they're misogynistic. And I think that says a lot. I think people are looking for somebody they can look up to and trust. And I think with Kamala and Tim Walz, you've got that in both of them.
Yeah, I think that is very, very true. And just to go off on a slight tangent for a second, since you brought this up, I think it is actually very true that families have been fragmented by this political aberration that took place. The reason it stuck in my mind was because August 4th was the anniversary of when Nixon resigned, but it was also the death of the fairness doctrine. You
Right.
remember that? And
Right.
that happened under Reagan. The FCC said, well, we got cable now, so we don't have to do the fairness doctrine anymore, where everybody gets, you have to look at the issue from both sides and so forth. And amazingly, all those AM radio stations out there that had been playing country music stopped and put on Rush Limbaugh and his imitators. So you
Right.
had talk radio, and then Reagan let this ne'er-do-well from New Zealand pop into the country and start up Fox News as an alternative to real news. And people were sucked in by that. They were changed by that. And, you get 24 hours a day of Rush Limbaugh in your pickup, and then you come home, you watch Fox all evening. Yeah, you're going to get radicalized, just like those kids who were going to destroy the Taylor Swift concert with knives and so forth were radicalized, probably online by ISIS and so forth. That's the way it happens. And yes, a large portion of the male population of the hinterland was radicalized first by talk radio, then by Fox News, and online now by QAnon. Although I got a feeling that most of I have nothing really to base this on except my gut. I mean, I see these people on their phones occasionally, but I don't think they're visiting a lot of websites and stuff. They're just parroting each other,
Right.
is what it comes down to. So yeah, a large portion of the male population, what we used to call blue collar workers, although I don't know what color they are now, because they're basically contract employees and self-employed people in a service economy. They're very much sucked in by all of this stuff. They want to feel important. They want to feel patriotic. They want to feel like God loves them or whatever. And they're sucked in by this because they got nothing else. They don't see any future. They don't see any way out of this. All the jobs went overseas. I mean, their dad used to make $60 working at the local John Deere plant, $60 an hour. They're busting their hump 7 days a week mowing lawns to bring in half of that.
Right.
So yeah, they've lost hope. And when there's somebody telling them it's not your fault, it's all these damn immigrants coming in and taking the jobs, which is bullshit, of course. But they want to believe something like that. So yeah, a large portion of the population was radicalized by Fox News and by talk radio and other things. And yeah, it fragments families. Nobody wants to fight around the Thanksgiving table about that crap.
You brought up the fairness doctrine, and I don't know that everybody understands what the fairness doctrine is. There's a lot of parts to it. But I think basically, before it was gotten rid of, it basically said if you're a media outlet, a radio station, or a TV, you are a service to the public.
Right.
You don't own the airwaves. The government is allowing you to use those airwaves, and you should use those decently and intelligently. And the fairness doctrine basically said that, okay, if you want to put out a Republican view, now you have to have equal time for the Democratic view. So people got both sides of the story. And that was why when we were young and we watched TV news and that sort of thing, we got a more accurate look at what was going on. And so when that was wiped away, and I believe that was Reagan who did that.
Yes.
And then it was a free for all. You could do whatever the hell you wanted. And then they got rid. There was a point where you could only own so many radio stations and so many TV stations. Now you can own the whole fucking market if you want. So those things really stole away any fairness for the people who are consumers of this media. And this is why you get a Fox News or a far left channel too. And this is where the divisiveness came in this country. Depending on what you watch, you have a different story. And we can't agree if we don't know the whole story.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why you see the concentration of intellect in the cities now, too. I'm not saying everybody in the hinterland is stupid. They just don't have the opportunities. Like here where I live, there's 3 TV stations, broadcast stations.
You have a choice.
But they are all owned by the same people, by right-wing people. So we
Right.
get only the right-wing viewpoint. Now, let me give you an example here. My brother brought this to my attention, and he was fairly conservative most of his life, and now he's definitely a never-Trumper, and he's pushing Walz and Kamala Harris and
Wow.
Tim Walz. Here he was watching news the other night. We had a contest here between two Republicans for the state Senate office. And I don't know why it was so contested, because it's a Republican state. I mean, out in Memphis and Nashville, there's a fairly strong Democratic presence, but we've had a Republican legislature and governor for 14 years.
Right.
I mean, it's been locked in pretty much. Well, these two guys, a guy who'd been state senator for a long time, and an upstart who happened to be the son of the woman who is our congressional representative. Harshbarger is her. Diane Harshbarger is her name. She's terrible. She's a backbencher, never does anything, but
Right.
somehow or other she got Trump to do a commercial for her, calling her a warrior and all of this bullshit, and also endorsing her son. There was like $2 or $3 million spent on a state senator race here
Right.
in this district. It was insane. The father of Bobby Harshbarger, who did win, by the way, was caught on video stealing signs and destroying signs for the other candidate. I got the video of him doing it. Now, he'd just gotten out of prison for selling bogus drugs to the VA, where his wife should have been with him, and probably the son too. But anyway, he was out destroying people's signs. The the person reading the story, the lead anchor man on this local channel, said, you can't discount the love of a father for their son that would cause them to do something like this.
Wow. Wow.
Essentially making an excuse for this behavior, which is criminal, of course. And so you can see what we're up against here.
Well, when you talk about the hinterlands too, you and I worked in radio, and
Yeah.
you'd go into every market and you'd have different owners, local owners, and that sort of thing. But now we have companies like Sinclair, which is
Right.
highly right wing, highly Trumplafuck, and they have money, and they basically dominate a lot of these small towns. That's their
They do.
stock in trade. So you've got people in small towns who have one or two radio stations, and that's all they hear. They, like you say,
Right.
they don't, unless they know how to use Google, and we don't know that that's the case.
Nah.
They listen to the radio stations, and they're listening to the same bullshit over and over every day.
Yeah, exactly the same. And Sinclair owns not only radio but TV. And
Absolutely.
a lot of these, I forget what the other one is. It doesn't matter; they're exactly the same. They own one of the other TV stations, and
Right.
Sinclair owns two of them. This other one owns the other one, and they're very similar. But they also both own newspapers too. I mean, the newspapers are just about done. Outside the big cities. I mean, there's not much to them. They're basically like the shoppers used to be. There's few ads for the local food city and some auto dealerships and that kind of thing, and a lot of syndicated right wing bullshit. So yeah, I mean, that's why the Democratic strongholds are the city, because still in most cities you do still have an outlet that is at least, if not balanced, at least presents the liberal viewpoint to a degree, or they have, in conjunction with the local news, the national news comes on right after, and the people have a lot of they'll have Spectrum or something like that has a more balanced viewpoint, perhaps. But by and large, once you get outside the cities, you're looking at solid red as far as opinion makers go.
Yeah, fortunately, those areas are sparsely populated compared to the
Yes,
cities. So
exactly.
while there might be a lot of counties that are red, that doesn't represent a lot of people. I wanted to bring this up to you. Yesterday, I talked on the podcast with Tony, and Tony has a military background, as you do. They're trying to find anything to tear Tim Walz apart. He doesn't own any stocks. His net worth is a little below the average. He sold his only real estate for less than it was worth when he took over the governor's job and went to the governor's mansion. I mean, this guy is squeaky clean. So they're going to go at him like they did John Kerry, try to swift boat him, and try to suggest that he has stolen valor, which I find ironic coming from who it's coming from. But what have your thoughts been about that story with Tim Walz?
Well, the timeline just kind of screams bullshit. I mean, it was like 10 months before the deployment that he actually left the service. But in order to do that, he had to put in paperwork probably a year before that. So
Right.
yeah, there's nothing to it. It's all bullshit. And the Swift boat illusion is quite apt because that we know was all crap.
Yeah.
They have another, I think, the sergeant major who came in after him, who's you know, basically put that story out there. But the guy was, he's a habitual right wing poster on X and all of the other media outlets. So he's just, he's carrying water for the Republicans. There's nothing to it, of course. And I think Tim is people are just not going to buy it. They're just not
Yeah.
going to believe it. I mean, this guy was in there for 25 years working on disasters and so forth. And, he made the statement that, they need to regulate like this weapon that I carried, weapon of war, whatever. Well, I was a linguist, but I had to qualify with the M16 and I had to do it every year,
Right.
and so did everybody else in every MOS in the Army, quite frankly. So that's your job title, MOS. Um, so yeah, he knows all about what an automatic weapon or a semi-automatic weapon can do. Anyone who's ever fired one realizes the power you have in your hands, and you don't want some crazy nut running around to your kid's school with one if you're sane.
Well, it's ironic that it would be coming from J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance spent 4 years in the service. Tim Wall spent 24, 25 years in the service. Um, J.D. Vance reached E4.
That's
Tim Walz,
automatic, by the way, if you don't
yeah,
screw up.
yeah, and Tim Walz was an E9 when he retired.
Yeah, and
Um,
that is hard to get to. There are very few of those. A command sergeant major is like hen's teeth.
yeah,
It's the
yeah.
highest enlisted rank.
So, and this guy, he acts like he's a battle worn veteran. He was in public affairs, and people
Yeah,
will say, well, don't diminish his service as public affairs. I'm not. What I'm saying is that he was in the service, and him trying to diminish another service member is appalling. That's that's just fucking unbelievable to me that they would do this. And then you throw on top of that the guy in the top of the ticket dodged the draft multiple times back in
right.
Vietnam, and they had the audacity to call out Tim Walz for his service. He actually did his job. He did what he had to do. He had a disability from it too because he was in artillery and he lost hearing in one ear and he needed an
Yeah.
operation to fix that. This is really just a Hail Mary pass by these people, and it tells you how little they have to fight against Tim Walz, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I was originally drafted and then I enlisted. And when you go into basic training, you're either, I think it was RA meant that you were enlisted, right? And
Mhm.
then there was another designation if you were drafted, and then it was NG if you were National Guard, and then it was RB if you were, I think it was RB if you were reserves. And the way the permanent personnel, the training personnel viewed you was you could tell they were right there with the guys who enlisted. I mean, it was like, hey, brother.
Right.
National Guard was you're a weekend warrior. Don't waste my time. Same with the reserves to a certain extent at that point. And the draftees they didn't much like because they knew they didn't want to be there. Um, so the lifers don't much like the National Guard or reserve guys, right? They see them as dilettantes and part-time people. But uh, when you actually see what the National Guard does, they're there for the disasters, right? That's the
Right.
first ones out there. They're doing they're going in where the flood is. They're rescuing people in the boats. They're going in and doing that stuff. They're doing some hard shit, and so I have great respect for them as well.
You
And,
know,
and once upon a time, back in Vietnam, if you could get in the reserves or the National Guard, that was your safe berth. You weren't going to Vietnam.
Right.
That changed with the Gulf War when people who got into the Guard and Reserves were suddenly surprised to find they were going,
Right.
and that's who suffered a goodly portion of the casualties were the Guard and the Reserves. And I got to say, I don't know what it was like in my time, but what it was since my time. But when I was drafted and then enlisted, the you'd got the same training for the first 3 months, basic, and
Mhm.
then whether you were National Guard or Reserves or whatever, you went on to your specific training, and then you went home and you had 1 week in the month that you served, and then you did a summer camp, right? But that doesn't mean that you necessarily got your skills up to snuff all the times, and I think that probably had something to do with. Uh, um, well, I'm not going to say that. I'm just going to say that the lifers, the people that were in the Army all the time, it was what they did. They looked askance at that, the Guard and the Reserves, and felt like they didn't have sufficient training to do their jobs in many cases.
I think the Republicans are missing the boat a little bit, focusing so much on Tim Walz because they aren't running against Tim Walz. They're running against Kamala Harris, and that's a fucking train coming down the tunnel, going to run their ass over. You can spend as much time on Tim Walz as you want, but you better focus on Kamala because she's an unstoppable force at this point.
I think you're right. And let me just say that what I just described to you was not my feelings about the Guard or Reserves. I had friends in both, and
Yeah,
they did great service, all of them. Anybody who serves their country in any capacity deserves our thanks and our admiration, I
right.
believe.
I agree.
I'm not looking for it myself because I got stuff out of being in the Army as well. I got GI Bill benefits and um, um, homeowner benefits, all sort of things that were mine for doing that. But I do support national service. I wish there was an avenue for everybody to do it, even those who don't particularly want to be in the military. I think it's a great idea, and I think it's great seasoning for people. You come out of high school or college, it gives you a couple of years to get acclimated to life again and see that there's more to it than just you in some ways. So
Right.
I support national service, and all of these guys and women, especially the women, because after post Vietnam, the women were, and even during Vietnam, the women were just as important. If you go on to any military base, you're going to see as many women as men now, and they're all doing I'm sure, a terrific job.
One of the things I'm most concerned about with Tim Walz, I think he's a great candidate. I think he's the perfect vice presidential nominee. But we were all surprised how when he came out, he had all this excitement behind him. He had all this momentum, much like Kamala did. He's got a big personality. He's got a bigger personality than Kamala. Kamala's
Yeah.
good. She's more businesslike, and I like that in the presidential candidate. But he's got a big personality, and I think the Democrats have to be careful to use Tim Walz to the full advantage. But then at some point, he has to step back and just be kind of the spice in the entree, not be a co-opponent. He's got to
No.
play. He's got to play his position and be there to benefit Kamala because it should all be about Kamala.
Yeah, I read an article that said basically early on that Obama and Joe had to have a little meeting to iron that out
Yeah,
because Joe was kind of speaking out about his priorities, not about Obama's, and he had
right,
to be kind of said, "Well, we might get to that down the road, but I'm the president,
right.
and this is the agenda, so I need you to focus on that." And they may have had that meeting too. I don't know, but yeah, that's very important that the vice president realizes they are the vice president. Now, if you go back to the beginning of the country, it was the guy who got the second most votes who became the vice
Right.
president. They quickly learned that wasn't the way to go, of course.
Well, they're finding that out in North Carolina because
Absolutely.
Roy Cooper was one of the vice presidential nominees, and the whole reason he didn't take the job or continue in because his lieutenant governor was a crazy ass Trump-la-fuck who said some people need killing. And
Yeah.
he was afraid the moment he walks out the state, this lieutenant lieutenant governor would start making proclamations and doing crazy shit. So he thought it was better for his state to stay where he is as opposed to let this fucker run wild. But apparently in North Carolina, you got the guy with the second amount of votes as a lieutenant
Yeah,
governor, and that's crazy. That's a
it is
crazy
crazy.
idea.
Yeah, apparently he did something when when the governor went on a overseas trip or something, or maybe it was just out of the state. He issued some sort of proclamation or something, and yeah, that didn't float very well. Obviously, I don't think the guy has a chance in hell of being governor, but
No, I don't believe so.
at least I hope not. But I never thought Trump would be president either.
Yeah, I've said this too. You know, people want to make comparisons to 2016 or 2020 and say, well, that happened then, this could happen now. I just feel like we're in a completely different world now. We're on a whole different timeline, a whole different parallel universe. The mindsets, what people know, what they didn't know back then. I don't know what's a good comparison with 2016 or even 2020. In the last 4 years, so much has come out about the Republican Party and Donald Trump. It can't be the same. It's just not possible.
Maybe not. I hope not. I mean, we know Trump now, and people didn't know him as much back then. They knew him as a successful businessman with a TV show. That's what they knew about him. You know, they know that persona is false now. At least
Yeah.
everybody, but the very very hardcore Trumpies know that. But there's so much going on. I mean, we just found out yesterday that the Georgia Election Commission is going to let local people decide whether they can certify or not. I hope that doesn't stand. I hope that's addressed somehow. But with the courts we have now, who knows? That's a blatant attempt to delay or falsify election records in Georgia. That's going on there. There's a system called ERIC that allows local officials to check registration on people and so forth. I think it's 8 or 9 Republican states have backed out of that and created one that's called, I think, Eagle Point or something like that. And it allows me to challenge your election, your voting eligibility, or any of my neighbors or anything like that, which is going to create a huge mess, of course. All of this needs to be addressed. And I hope the Democrats in Congress and in the White House and everywhere else where they have power is figuring out some way to deal with this kind of stuff, because it's going to be rampant again, just like it was in the last election. Now, fortunately, the courts turned back all the challenges last time. Will they this time? I don't know.
Well, people have come to me and they're just upset. Oh, they're just going to cheat. Well, of course they're going to cheat. They cheated in 2020. They cheated in 2016. The big difference here is that we've seen it all before. There probably is some preparations to handle these things in advance. And the big difference is Donald Trump is not the president. Joe Biden's the president. The power is with the Democrats. So the idea that they might be successful in trying to cheat, I'm just not buying it, because um, they couldn't do it when they had all the advantages. And now that we know ahead of time, there's no surprises, and we have a president who is a patriot, true patriot, and also has some immunity. Now, as much as he might
Right.
not do something underhanded, if we're hanging by a thread in our democracy, it gives him a lot of sway to do a lot of fucking things.
Yeah, absolutely. He can nationalize the National Guard, for
Right,
example.
right.
And if Georgia is doing untoward things, he can nationalize their National Guard, send them in, and put them under military arrest if he wants to. He can, if the Proud Boys show up at the box office, he can send in a few National Guard drones. You know, it can be handled.
Right. I don't think that Joe Biden's going to slowly and quietly fade off into oblivion.
No.
I think he plans to get some things done, especially after the election, that 2.5 months he has after the election. I think we're
Yeah.
going to see some action out of old Joe.
Yeah, I hope so. I really wish there was something they could do about the court and some of these decisions, because um, Chevron is huge. People
Right.
don't know it yet. They don't realize what it does. But did you ever notice that rich people don't live where the pollution is? That's the problem here.
Right,
I
right.
mean, you're a corporate executive. You don't understand about coal ash. You don't know what the byproducts of fracking are. You don't really give a shit. You just know you make money from this stuff, right? If you had to live with it, somebody once proposed if the industry in which you're involved with produces toxic waste, you have to take it home with you at night. You know, I mean, that's tongue in cheek, of course, but really, they don't live where they crap where they don't crap where they live. Is what I'm trying
Right,
to say.
right.
They
No,
crap where I live and where you live and where
right.
especially minorities live. Always, always.
I thought it
Uh,
was I thought it was funny when I was watching Fox News. My wife and I, she says, "You got to turn on Fox News. We got to see what they think about this." And I go, "I don't want to listen to Fox News, but she's my wife, and she scares me, frankly." And so
right.
I turned it on Fox News, and they're saying it was just struck me funny because they were talking about all the things that Tim Walz is for, making abortion legal, feeding
Mhm.
kids. He's against
Mhm.
fracking. And they went down the litany of things that he was for, as if it was the most horrific thing in the world. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm on board with that. What's so bad about that? What's the problem with that? And that's what these people do. They take things and they try to convince and persuade people to believe that good things are actually bad things. And unfortunately, there are people that fall into that trap.
Well, that's it, and that they want to believe, and they want to be part of the team. They want to. That's the other thing I found out when I moved back down here that I had forgotten, and that is the clannishness
Yeah.
of people who live in the hinterland. And I don't mean to tar everybody with the same brush, but it's true, and it's especially hard in some areas where it's more important to fit in than to be right.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely right. Well, Ed, we're going to take a quick break and we will be right back. We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. We've got Ed with us today, and it's always interesting to get his perspective from an older man, which is never something I get to say on this show. So it's good to have an older man on the show. You know, it's been kind of weird with Donald Trump. I almost get the impression Donald Trump is in a state of depression because nothing is working his way in this whole process. And that's how he's always been. You know, he kind of bulldozes his way through things and he survives off momentum. And that momentum is now gone. We've got Kamala and Tim Walz hitting 8 venues over 4 days for campaign speeches. And Donald Trump, I think he went to Montana yesterday or today or whatever. And, you know, that's a state that doesn't have any electoral votes and he's already up by
Right.
points. So what's the point? Uh, and he does this press conference at Mar-a-Lago. And somebody asked him in the crowd, they said, where you been for the last week? Why aren't you campaigning? Why are you just sticking at home at Mar-a-Lago? And he says, well, that's a stupid question. It's because I'm up by so far, which is ridiculous.
Not true.
But it's interesting he would say that giving a press conference in his home, in his home state, and not have to get out of his bunny slippers to go out on the road. He decides to have this press conference, and I get the impression that this is just something Donald Trump pulled off. His people around him didn't okay this. He had an open opportunity. There was some press at Mar-a-Lago for some other reason, and he just put on this press conference thinking, I'm a fucking genius. I'll be able to turn this around. Didn't
Yeah.
go that way. But doesn't it
Uh,
surprise you that he's not out bouncing around?
I've heard a couple of theories on that. Number one is, and we saw a little bit of it on the stump. I forget. I guess it was Milwaukee, where he was basically just for a moment he let down his guard, and it was almost like I'm so tired of this shit. I
Yeah.
wish I didn't have to do this. He didn't say that in so many words, but that was the attitude that came out of him. The other thing is, I think he sees the handwriting on the wall, and he knows he's going to lose. And I
Yeah.
think that's keeping him up at night. So I don't think he's sleeping well, and I think he's probably going on Adderall or whatever. What's with the haircut? It's different and it's
Yeah.
worse.
Hard to
But
imagine.
yeah, I can't. I think we're seeing him falling apart. I mean, in every Shakespearean play near the end, the protagonist goes mad. I mean, there's
Right.
even a quote: "Those whom the gods would destroy, they first make mad." And I think we're seeing that, right? And that may have been going on for a while now.
Well,
But
it may be
go
money
ahead.
too. It may be money
Yeah,
too. He doesn't have much in the way of money. I mean, he always bragged about how much money and how many people attending his things, and that's all going against him now. In a couple of weeks, Kamala got $310 million, and then after Tim Walz was announced, they got another $36 million. And last month, um, Trump claims they got $138 million, less than half of what Kamala and Tim Walz got. And we don't even know that that's true because Donald
right.
Trump will fucking lie about it. We won't know until there's
Sure.
some documentation of it. And any money he gets has to go to pay to his legal fees. So he's really been hamstringed in this campaign over and above all the things he has going for him. He's not going to be campaigning very hard. He certainly is not going to be able to keep up the pace that Kamala and Tim Walz are running just by
That's
virtue of
right.
his
Well,
age.
and that, and also the money thing, you realize too, there are venues who won't let him come anymore because he didn't pay them last time.
Right.
And so that's why he's doing a lot of these outdoor things in cow pastures and so forth, is because none of the venues will let him in, or very few will,
Right.
because he owes them money. I think a big one too that's worrying him right now is he's going to be sentenced.
September 18th.
Yeah, it's coming. And I
It is.
think seeing that coming, he's got to think, well, maybe he won't give me, or maybe it won't be a prison term, but it could be jail term.
Well, and that's the thing. One of the things they've said about Kamala and now Tim Walz too is, oh, they're just on their honeymoon period, but it keeps rolling along, and they need things to continue to excite the base for Kamala and Tim Walz, and part of that will be the upcoming convention
Convention.
in about a week. That should be quite a bigger and better event than what the Republicans had. Then, if there's a debate on September 10th. That will be interesting and positive for Kamala Harris. And then on the 18th, the sentencing. All these things are going to take a toll on the upcoming election. And none of it looks positive for Donald Trump.
No, no, it doesn't, because after the convention, and as you mentioned, basically the Republican convention was kind of one big shrug.
Yeah, it
When you
really
get right
was.
down to it, it was like, okay, nothing new here, folks. And then when he had the chance to change the tone, I'm a different man, maybe go for policy or something like that. What does he do? No, he does an hour and a half of shtick, just his
Right.
standard bullshit. I won the election. Election was stolen. Where am I? Oh yeah, election was stolen, and Wales, and whatever pops out of his demented mind, which
I
you
th-
can see the dementia.
yeah, I think his intent was to make that change at first.
Yeah,
But when he saw he wasn't getting the adulation and the reaction he'd hoped for, he just reverted back to the same old song and dance. And he thinks that's going to benefit him. Everybody around him knows that's not true, but he doesn't get it. And he just goes off on this tangent. And that's kind of what I saw with this press conference. He was getting tired of, you know, Kamala getting 12,000 in Wisconsin and 50,000 in Detroit and getting all this money. He felt like he had to get into the narrative, into the news cycle, so he could pull it back to him. So he stepped up on that stage. Most people around him didn't know it was coming. You notice how everything about that press conference, it was on his home turf.
yeah,
There were no mics in the crowd where you could hear the people asking the questions. It was just
right.
him up there pontificating, acting like he was answering questions, but Donald Trump doesn't answer questions. Now, his biggest complaint, the shot at Kamala Harris, well, she won't do an interview. She's afraid to do an interview, which is absolute bullshit. I saw her come off a plane recently, and she asked
Sure.
about 8 questions. I have no problem with Kamala sitting down with anybody, Fox News or otherwise, doing an interview. She's going to
Yeah.
come off just fine. They are just absolutely flailing, grabbing onto anything and hoping against hope something fucking sticks.
Yeah, I mean, if she does the debate on Fox, which I would tell her don't do it because all you're doing is put money in Rupert Murdoch's pocket. Fuck
Yeah.
that. But and you're not going to win anybody over on that was watching for Fox. But I would go in there if I were her, and I would be, I'd be uh, quite firm, about calling out the bullshit questions, calling out the bullshit follow-ups, and all of that, and just pointing out the lies that they tell, and that they had to pay $1 billion for lying.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
the network had to pay that much, and there's still another suit out there that hasn't been settled yet. So they were sanctioned for lying. Well, why does anybody think they've changed their stripes? Of course they haven't.
Right. Right. And the thing is, I don't have a problem with her doing a debate on Fox News, but you got to understand how Donald Trump thinks. The first debate that was scheduled September 10th on ABC, he contracted with it. Uh, the Democrats did too. I don't know that they stipulated it had to be Joe Biden or whoever, but um, that's the one that's been set. Everybody's agreed on
Yeah,
it. Now Donald Trump wants to um, throw this Fox News thing in there. So he says, well, I'm going to do it on September 4th before the September 10th. And Kamala said, no, man, we'll talk about other debates, but we're doing the one we set up. And so he thought he could use that to tell everybody, oh, see, she's scared of me. And he tried that, but it didn't work.
yeah,
So now he
yeah,
comes back with another angle. Well, we'll do three debates. We'll do the Fox News, the ABC News on the 10th. I will show up to the one on the 10th, and then we'll do another one on NBC later in the month. However, you notice what he did there. He still wants the Fox News to be first.
yeah. And then he
Now,
would cancel the other two.
right, exactly. Now, Kamala and her team aren't stupid enough to do that. Kamala should say, we'll do the one on September 10th, and then we'll set up the other ones after that. That's what she should stick to. It's not
Yeah,
about being fearful. I think if she went on Fox News, she'd still destroy him. It doesn't.
yeah, I do too.
But I think if he does show up to September 10th, he's going to cancel the next ones because he's going to be
Yeah,
devastated in that particular debate. Donald Trump does not want to do the debate, but he's been hearing people saying, "Oh, you're a pussy ass bitch because you won't debate," and he can't handle
no,
that. He's got to
no,
show he's tough. And the thing is, when a narcissist is at this state of the spiral, um, and there's really no way out that they would normally use to get out, they start taking risks. Even if
yeah.
those risks are a no-win situation, they will do anything hoping against hope that they can pull it out because they're such geniuses. So this is when, between now and November, this is when Donald Trump makes a lot of fucking mistakes.
Yeah, his big mistake was running for president again. I think
Yeah.
that the country would have been content to let him fade away if he had just shut up.
Yeah, I agree.
Um, after now January 6th, I mean, they would have still had the hearings on that and so forth. But if he had not run again, there might have been, I don't know that he would have gotten a pardon, or whatever, and they may have gone after some of these other cases too. I don't know, but I in my heart of hearts, I feel like because they let Nixon off, they would have found a way to let him off if he would just get the hell out of Dodge and
Right.
keep his mouth shut, which seemed to be the deal they made with Nixon, because as hard as it was for him not to comment, he never really did again.
No.
He went away and stayed away. That must have been the deal they cut, and they could always said, "We can always come back for you,"
Right.
or whatever. But as soon as he started running again, and especially when he announced early, it was obvious that he was doing it to avoid the um, the long arm of the law. That's what it was all about, always. And him getting the nomination is simply because the Republicans, they have purged the intelligence from the entire party. There's none left. There's only raw ambition.
Right. Well, from the very beginning, Donald Trump could have saved himself a lot of trouble simply by shutting his mouth. A good thing that comes to mind is E. Jean Carroll. When he got
Right.
fined for $5 million, he should have paid the $5 million and shut the fuck up. But he couldn't.
Yeah.
Then it turned into $90 million.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know, a lot of the stuff wouldn't have been pursued had he just kept his mouth shut, and he's just not capable of it. Now, I've heard some people say this, and I disagree with it completely, that as the polls go down and it looks more imminent that he's going to lose, he's going to go to Georgia and to Joe Biden and try to cut a deal. Well, I'll leave the race if you don't send me to jail, commute my sentence or whatever. Uh, and the thing about it is that's a cool story, bro. But when you've just kicked the shit out of the governor of Georgia and his wife, and you've done what you've done to Joe Biden, and since there would be, if you were losing, there'd be really no reason for anybody to benefit you. I just don't. I could see him trying it, but I don't think that's going to work.
I still think at some point we're going to have a white Bronco day with Trump. Maybe in his airplane, it may be somewhere or other. But when it starts to close in, cowards are cowards, and bullies are cowards. And I think Trump, we see how big a bully he is. That shows me how big a coward he is too. So at some point, the prospect of having to go in there and share a cell with somebody who may not be his best friend is going to scare the crap out of him. I don't know how they would handle it with Secret Service protection or whatever, but maybe he gets some sort of home confinement. Maybe he has to
Yeah.
wear the ankle bracelet. I'm not sure what the deal is, but I think it's beginning to fret on him, and it couldn't happen to a nicer guy.
Well, my experience with a narcissist is always the same thing. They have the rise and they're flying high, and then they start to spiral, and then it closes in and closes in, and when they finally crash or come close to crashing, they're flailing, and that's when they're the most dangerous. But inevitably, when a narcissist crashed and there's no way out, they are cowards, so they run. The problem with Donald Trump is he's pretty recognizable. He can't go
Yeah,
hide someplace. And people say, well, he'll leave the country. I don't know that he can do that because the Secret Service is a law enforcement arm. And if they allow
true.
him to leave the country, they better fucking be going with him because they're going to have problems back here if they allow that to happen.
There's something I got to throw in here, and it's crazy. I say right now, it's batshit crazy. Don't take me seriously, but it occurred to me, and I'm going to put it out there. Okay. Let's talk about this assassination attempt. I
Yeah,
mean, we saw a video just this morning, or I saw it for the first time this morning, of the local cops when the cop went up, saw the guy, jumped back down, and said the guy should. And they were trying to reach out to the Secret Service, but they were on a different radio frequency. Apparently, we saw that in real time, and the guy said, "I told him about the fucking roof,"
yeah,
I mean, and so forth. You know who Roger Stone is,
I
right?
do. I do.
And there are a number of other operatives within the Republican Party who are, quite frankly, evil. I mean, Roger Stone is a Bond villain. I mean, he would be the second in command to a Bond villain, right?
Right.
I mean, this guy has no morality, no ethics, no conscience, nothing, right? We even caught him on tape talking about shooting members of Congress to get
Right.
people's attention and so forth.
Right.
How hard would it be for these guys to find a young man like this who's been radicalized? He can shoot. He belongs to a gun club. He's made a few statements online and so forth. They look around, they find a kid like this, and they go to him and say, "This is your chance to be a hero and save your country. What we need you to do is just fire some rounds into the crowd. It's collateral damage. Don't hit Trump. We got this, just shoot into the crowd and you'll be a hero." And then they take him out, the snipers take him out, cover their tracks and so forth. Trump slaps the blood bag behind his ear and, waves his fist and so forth. Because I'm telling you, this is not Trump. This is not the Trump we know, this defiance in the face of death. Trump is
No.
under the table, and
He's
we hear,
crying, shitting his
right, we
pants.
Yeah, we hear him saying, "I got to put my shoes on. No, I want to do this." There's stuff going on in that huddle that shouldn't have been going on. Normally, they're whisking him out of there, and that's it. There's no time for talk. There's no shoes. There's none of that shit. And then he shows up within a couple of days, and there's no wound.
Right.
Okay, it's okay. I'm the first one to say this is wild conspiracy theory, but is it?
Well, that's the point. What you just said sounds like a crazy conspiracy theory. Up until the time you put Donald Trump, Roger Stone, or any of those people like that in the equation. It's not fucking crazy. That's the weird thing. And now you've got the FBI investigating it. You have the FBI saying we're not sure if it was a bullet or shrapnel or whatever. Then we have another FBI guy saying it was definitely a bullet. We've got this fake ass doctor, Ronnie Jackson, saying there's a 2 centimeter hole, but we've seen the ear. There isn't a fucking scratch on the ear. It's absolutely crazy. And then people say, well, somebody died. And that was my first reaction. It can't be fake if somebody died. And then I thought to myself, would people around Donald Trump or Donald Trump himself be willing to sacrifice some collateral damage for their own benefit? Well, COVID-19 comes to mind and a million people dying because he did sacrifice them by saying it was a hoax and doing nothing about it. It all sounds crazy, but it's possible given the crazy fucks we've got involved. Now, somebody else said to me, and I'm curious to what you think about this, the FBI is investigating it. This isn't hard to figure out. Show me the fucking ear. Show me the doctor's report.
Right.
That's all you got to do. Show me that shit.
Right.
And, but somebody said, it's funny how nobody's really talking about it. Maybe the administration, Biden's administration, say, just keep it on the DL right now, in hopes to make it the ever popular October surprise. Now that sounds crazy too, but
Yeah.
does it really sound crazy?
No.
It's weird.
I just remember Timothy McVeigh after the Oklahoma City bombing when somebody said, "Well, what about all those people you killed?" He said, "Collateral damage."
Right.
I mean, and is he so much different? Was Timothy McVeigh so much different? I mean, he was radicalized the same way.
Right.
And I just see this young kid, this loner, a chance to be somebody, a chance to go down in history. Who knows what line he might have been fed and so forth, because yeah, it's crazy. And I don't want to believe that something like that's possible. I hesitated even to bring it up, but it's been weighing on my mind since I saw that video that this is almost on purpose that they're ignoring this. I mean, the cops know this kid's up there. People in the crowd know this kid's up there with a gun. They know it. The people had reported this guy walking around with a rangefinder beforehand. Nobody touches him. He winds up on the roof somehow. Climbed up on garbage cans, something we don't know, but somehow or other he's up there. He fires. He managed to miss Trump, kill some other people. Trump slaps his ear. There's supposedly a wound that isn't there.
Right.
I don't know. There's just too much. It's like Dallas all over again, but stupid.
But stupid. Yeah. That's the thing is I had to go through Secret Service clearance one time in my life to go see a vice president. It was Nelson Rockefeller. I was working at KBM. I was 17. This is cool. And I got to walk up to him and shake hands with him and ask him some questions. But I will tell you, in that environment, when you've got a president or a vice president there, if I'm standing on the back and one guy hears something and passes on to the other guy that I say, I'm going to kill the president, I'd be fucking tackled and hauled out of there so fucking quickly. The idea that somebody says, hey, there's a guy with a gun on the roof. Yeah. Why else would he fucking be there?
Right.
And with that body cam, the cop said he went up to the local police went up to look at it. And as soon as he peeked his head over the roof, the gunman pointed at him. So he backed down, obviously. And in moments after that, that's when the shots rang out. And then, of course, he was shot after the fact. It's just weird that they were so lax on this thing. They're trying to blame, well, the police didn't do this and the Secret Service. There's no room for fucking mistakes when it comes to the Secret Service. And we've been pretty lucky with them not making too many mistakes, save for JFK or um, or Reagan. But
Ford. Of
Ford,
course, they
yeah.
didn't get Ford. What's
No.
the other one? The
There was two with Ford. There was Sandra Good and Squeaky Fromm, both Manson people.
right. The other one was the other assassination attempt where the guy actually got shot. George Wallace.
Yeah, that one doesn't count because he was a racist fuck. But
Well,
but you're right. There is a lot to this. And is that something you think comes out either in an October surprise? Because we got to know what the fuck happened. When a former
yeah,
president, there's an attempted assassination, we as a public went through all the stuff we did for the JFK thing and we still don't know anything. I can't believe America is going to stand for not knowing nothing. No big deal. Let's just move on. And that's the weird thing about the Republicans. They've just kind of moved on. First thing
yeah,
they said was, oh, we just won the election because he's going to get all kinds of sympathy. That was a perception. He would get sympathy from the independents and the left side. But I said, if you go out and talk to any Democrat, any independent right now, and ask him about that assassination attempt, no matter how,
staged.
they all
Mhm.
say it's staged. So
Yeah,
and this is why I think it was staged, because it was a tactic by the Republicans. And once again, they fucked up and they always fuck up.
right. Yeah, I feel for the kid.
Oh, I do too.
I do. I would. Um, the other thing that's in my mind too about this, I mean, the cops see the kid, he drops back to the kid, boom, 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 and fires how 8 shots, I think
Eight
it is,
shots, yeah.
before a sniper takes him out. Now that means now I know how quick it takes. I've fired an M16. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Boom. There you
Yeah.
go. And that's without a bump stock. I don't know. I don't think he had a bump stock, but that means that sniper had to find him, sight in, and shoot. And there was no reason for him to be sighted in on him yet, or be aware of him yet, unless he was. And then why didn't he shoot before that? Why didn't he shoot on the first shot?
Right. Right.
You
Well, yeah,
know,
yeah. And the thing about it is too, if you knew there was a guy on a fucking roof with a gun, obviously you want to take him out, but at the very least, don't let Trump come out. Why
right?
would you let him come
Exactly.
out if you know there's an
Exactly.
issue? I mean, usually when there's Secret Service involved, anything's fishy, they cancel everything. We're not taking any
Absolutely.
chances, but they did in this case. And then on top of it, after you got the one shooter, you're presuming that there's only one shooter, which is never a good idea. They let him stand up, preen, raise his hand twice as he's on the way to the car. Should have took him 20 seconds to get to the car, took him fucking 3 minutes. So it's
Yeah.
all
Now,
just seems so ridiculous.
what if there's another shooter? You
Um,
know,
I mean, if it's a professional shot, there's probably going to be another shooter.
exactly. So yeah, it made no sense on so many things. I remember when I was in college, Nixon came to my university, and he was on the steps of the administration building, which faced the theater building. And none of us were interested in Nixon. We were trying to. I worked in the theater shop, and we were trying to build a set and get it up. That we had a show opening that weekend. So, but the Secret Service came in, and the teacher asked, "Well, can we keep working here?" And they said, "No way. We're
Yeah.
evacuating this building. You're facing. We have to have a person presence in every room in this building,
Right.
every room, and on the roof."
Right.
So everybody had to leave the building while Nixon was there. Now, just because it faced that building was a great location for somebody to shoot from. And you tell me they didn't even check this roof? That's insane. No, I don't buy it.
Well, even I have this story about my son. My son grew up in the suburbs, and all his friends are up in
Mhm.
college in a house in Duluth, right?
Yeah,
And so they're up there. They're suburban boys. They've never been in trouble. They don't know. They don't have any experience with the police. One day, my son's friend is sitting by the window, and there's this huge presence of a fucking SWAT team outside the house. And the first thing the kid thinks of, oh, hide the beer. Bitch, they ain't here for the beer. What happened was the kid next door had a gun and he was shooting it. So they basically took these guys, crowded them into the bathroom and said, sit down and don't move. And they got to every window and every room in the house to take out some clown in the fucking backyard of this Duluth house. So to suggest that anybody would be more lax when it involves a former president is absurd.
Right. No, it's there's just something that isn't jibing here, and everybody feels that way that I know of. It's like this ain't kosher. There's something wrong here, and then the Secret Service can't justify any of it. The Secret Service to me has been suspect ever since January
I agree.
6 because of the cell phones.
Right.
They deleted all their cell phone stuff.
Right.
So there was some kind of collusion there. We have to assume that.
Oh, shucks, that was just coincidence.
Yeah.
It just so happened it worked out that way. Yeah,
Well, sure, they sent us a memo telling us not to do that, but we forgot.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, exactly. And the thing about it is I agree with you. I think the Secret Service has a lot of problems, and it worries me because now they're protecting Joe Biden and Kamala
Right.
Harris. If they are siding with Donald Trump, who's to say they might let their guard down with those two? That's what I find most troubling. But that's something that's got to be addressed. And I think when Kamala Harris becomes president, I think we're at a point in time in this country where things are going to change dramatically quickly. Joe's been an easygoing guy. He's kind of does what politics dictates you normally do. I think she's going to be a little more assertive. She's going to know the troubles we had leading up to this point, and hopefully she gets down to business right away and looks at the court and looks at the Secret Service and looks at the problems that are an imminent threat to this country, because they are imminent threats to this country.
Absolutely. I mean, I saw a video of J.D. Vance. I don't know when this took place, but it was some kind of a forum or something where he was saying, we have to replace the ruling class in this country. We have to replace the moneyed class because they can't be controlled. And what he means, of course, they want to put the tech billionaires in there, the people that he worked for, the Peter Thiels and so forth. And that should frighten people.
Yeah.
That should absolutely frighten people. Now, I'm not super fond of the current ruling class, I'll be honest with you. But give me Warren Buffett over Bezos any day. Give me Warren Buffett over Musk any day. There is some basic sense of ethics and morality in a Warren Buffett or a Mark Cuban that you will not find in these other people. They're like their own creations. They are soulless automatons almost.
Right.
I'm not sure what is going on with them, but this is a class that needs to be taxed out of existence. You heard it here.
Yeah. Well, when you talk about security too, I wanted to mention this. J.D. Vance has been the wrong person. I think Tim Walz is the right person at the right time, and same with Kamala Harris. I think J.D. Vance is the wrong person at the wrong time. Now, Donald Trump, while he's not out campaigning, he had J.D. Vance following around Walz and Kamala.
Creepy.
Very creepy. And, he'd go to a police department and pull 200 people. So there's not much interest in J.D. Vance. But he did something at the airport that to me strikes as a security risk, just based on who he is and based on the situation. Kamala Harris's plane was on the tarmac, and he came in on his plane, and he thought he'd be funny or clever, and he was going to go walk over to her plane with his crowd of people. And he's nobody. He's a senator, but so the fuck what?
Yeah.
He was going to walk over to the plane to say, I'm going to check out my plane and see how I'm going to change it when I become vice president. And here he comes with all these people walking up to the vice president's plane. To me, that seems like a security risk. I don't care if it's J.D. Vance or a bunch of thugs. Somebody walking and marching toward the vice president's plane, they need to be fucking dealt with. It's not funny, it's not clever, and it's dangerous.
Exactly. You don't know who those people are,
No.
who are with him. He can't vouch for every one of them. One of them could toss a bomb on there. You never know. That makes me concerned for the safety of the candidates. It really does. And especially as you pointed out, if it's the Secret Service who's doing the protecting, how do we know? I hope they vetted everybody who's close to the candidates.
Yeah.
But I don't want an organization that deleted their cell phones protecting me. I'm sorry. I'll hire some private detectives or something. But and that's never been. I don't know what happened to that. Whatever happened to that? Did Congress ever bring them in and say what the hell went on here? You
No.
know, I had actually heard that they had reconstructed some of it, but I've heard nothing from that.
Yeah, it's weird. One of the things I think people are most frustrated by over the last 8 years is this whole premise that no one's above the law. Clearly, there
Right.
are a lot of people above the law, whether it be the president, the vice president, senators, members of the House. They're reluctant to go after them. I heard a story how the DOJ was going to go after Trump in Arizona, and the prosecutor said, "Yeah, don't do that." And I'm going, "What the?" We obviously we have a broken judicial system right now.
Yeah.
It seems to be really loose and really they give a lot of sway to politicians and people of power. You think that's something that can be fixed or changed? Is that something that Kamala Harris and Democrats will even look at?
Good question. I hope so. I think both sides tend to kind of wink at that kind of stuff because they all benefit from it too. But at some point, it has to stop. I mean, there has to be a point where we say, no, no one is above the law. I mean, Steve Bannon's sitting in a jail cell right now
Right.
for the same thing that Jim Jordan did, but Jim Jordan's still in Congress and has never been called to task for it.
Exactly.
And as much as I dislike Steve Bannon and wish he would stay there forever, I want him to have a roommate, and I want it to be Jim Jordan.
Well,
And there are others, different ones that refused to appear when they were subpoenaed before Congress and got away with it essentially.
well, and that's it. The premise is, well, he's a sitting member of Congress. That could get messy. So what? If you commit a crime, you should pay the price. Otherwise, tell these people who are sitting in Congress, you get to do whatever you fucking want. We're going to be too afraid to fucking confront you.
Yeah, well, who was the New Jersey senator that the
Men-
Democrat that um,
Menendez.
Menendez? He was a sitting member of Congress.
Yeah.
They still went after him. No, he did a crime. He will do the time. He resigned because he's a Democrat, and they do. Just like Al Franken did, just like anybody else who's been accused on a Democratic side does. Republicans don't, and they should be held accountable.
Right, right, exactly. It's we're getting close to the end here, and I just want to bring this up because nobody's really talking about it much, and it's a big deal. And it's about the sentencing coming up on September 18th. We're like a little over a month away, 5 weeks away from the sentencing. He's Donald Trump's tried to do everything to get out from under it, to delay it, to delay it. And when he's delayed it to September, he kind of fucking self-owned him. He owned himself on this one too, because he could have got sentenced in July, but now he's doing it in September. This is the September surprise because whatever he gets, it's going to be at the top of the news cycle, and it's not going to be positive for him, whether he gets jail time or whether he gets home confinement or whatever the fuck it is. But what do you think? What do you think they're going to give him? I personally think I don't know how they don't give him some jail time.
I'm hoping for jail time.
Yeah.
I think if they do, he will not serve it. They'll kick it up to the Supreme Court, who will expedite it and rule on it and say he was immune or something. I don't know if they can, but these are state charges, right?
Um. Yeah. I don't know that they can do that. It might go
Yeah,
to the state Supreme Court.
yeah, that's a possibility. But given that it's the New York State Supreme Court, I don't think they're going to reverse it. you
No,
know?
they aren't going to reverse it. And then there's the other issue. I'm curious as to what you think about this. We had the violation of the gag order. Now, he
Right,
violated it 9 times and he was punished for it and he was warned about it, but he still did it again 4 more times after that. And
right.
the judge said, um, I'll reserve my decision on that for later. Well, it would make sense that that would come up too, in addition to the 34 felony conviction. So, does he have a separate decision on that? And since he already fined him and he's only got two options, fine him or jail him, do they then put him in jail for 2, 3 days
I
for his
think they
crimes?
do.
I
I
think they
think
do
they
too.
do. And really, that's why you're supposed to keep your nose clean in between the verdict and sentencing, is so that you can claim, hey, I was a good boy. That should affect my sentencing, right?
Right.
Or I apologized or whatever, which of course he did not do.
No,
Or I owned up to it. I apologized. I threw myself on the mercy of the court. That works sometimes,
doesn't hurt.
depending. It doesn't hurt, but no, Trump did exactly the opposite,
Right.
got personal about the judge's family. Why would he be merciful? I mean, the guy was being an ass, just like always. That should influence the sentencing, and it should involve jail time, just for
Uh,
the hell of it.
yeah, just well, I can see them, if they decide not to go with jail time for the 34 felonies, which it's hard for me to understand. They say, well, he's a first time offender. Yeah, 34 motherfucking times. And he
Everybody's
was,
a first time offender until they're
yeah,
convicted the first
right.
time.
So say they say, okay, home confinement for 3 years. And of course, he'll appeal it and it'll be a little while before that happens. But I've got this fantasy that go home confinement, but a week in jail for the gag order thing. Because I got to tell you, whether you put Donald Trump in jail for a week or a year, I think the end result is the same. It pretty much destroys him because he's so fragile mentally. You put him in jail where he doesn't have any control and he's treated like a prisoner. He's going to freak the fuck out if he's in there for 2, 3 days. I think he thinks he can handle it, but I don't think so.
I wouldn't want to. I've never been in jail myself, nor would I want to be.
No, no.
Uh,
At least, at least he doesn't have to worry about being sexually assaulted. I can't imagine he'd be a big market value for that when he gets into prison. But you can tell he's terrified of prison, and with this imminent sentencing and no way out, that's why I'm thinking between now and September 18th, we might see some real crazy shit out of him, even before the election.
yeah, I'm wondering if that there's something about that haircut that makes me think this is a desperate attempt to cover up something, like he's losing even more or something like that. And that he doesn't know how to deal with it, so they're doing this weird thing with it. I'm not sure exactly what's going on there.
Well, and the idea that he's not going out and campaigning, it could be money, he could be tired, he could be embarrassed, he could just be mad. But some other people have suggested that maybe he has some kind of illness too, which isn't out of the realm of possibility for a 78-year-old man who eats McDonald's all the fucking time.
Right.
Um, and when you saw him, when you saw him in the debate with Joe Biden and you saw him um, in this press conference while he was disjointed, confused, and all this. He did seem to have some energy. So you have to wonder if there wasn't some medical stimulant in his body to get him up, to prop him up to do this.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's the people who worked on The Apprentice say that drugs were omnipresent, especially Adderall and cocaine. So, there's never been any reason for him to, go cold turkey. I'm sure he still does both on a regular basis, especially the Adderall. I think it's mother's milk to him by now.
Well, with Adderall, and if it's cocaine, it's cocaine. How long can a because I don't think he has any willpower. He just takes whatever he needs as much as he needs it. How long does a 78-year-old man doing Adderall and possibly cocaine fucking even survive? That shit's gonna kill you.
Yeah, beats me. I mean, his son's not going to last very long at the rate he's going.
No.
Don Jr., man, I see him on that, and I've never seen a better Coke display in my life than Don Jr. Trying to interview somebody.
He's definitely tweaking out there. He's got some issues, and it's funny to me that his handlers don't see that. Don Jr. I think what's happening here with Donald Trump Senior, Donald Trump Junior, they get a lot of advice from people, but nobody listens to shit.
Right.
Donald Trump doesn't listen to his lawyers. He doesn't listen to his administration. He doesn't listen to his handlers in this campaign. He knows better, so he's just going to do it his way, and he always fucks up. So that's why we say, let that fucker talk. Let him do whatever he's going to do, because it will never work out good for him.
Yeah, I don't know if you ever watched Silicon Valley, the TV show,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
there was a figure like a Bezos or something like that. It was an elder statesman kind of wacko
right.
Silicon Valley guy who he had an event that he was trying to stream go haywire, and he was speaking to his closest advisors, and he said, "Am I fooling myself? Am I just such an ego-driven piece of crap that I've surrounded myself with sycophants that just tell me what I want to hear?" And the guy goes, "Oh no." So yeah, I think that's both Trump and his progeny.
Yeah, and I think when Donald Trump acts the way he acts, I think the people around him aren't telling him the bad news and are hyping up the good news, if there is any good news. I don't think Donald Trump is well informed about what the world and his campaign is really going through. He sees things and he gets angry. Well, they're getting a lot of people going to see Kamala Harris, but well, and a couple things he mentioned in the press release or press conference. He was suggesting that he was getting bigger crowds on January 6th than Martin Luther King got on his I Have a Dream speech. He
Yeah.
fucking believes that. He really
Oh
fucking
yeah.
believes.
Well, he also says that they're keeping people out. They're
Yeah,
not letting people in.
because everybody's out
The
to get him.
yeah, the school board wouldn't let everybody in because of the venues requirements or whatever, which is just it was all total bullshit.
The last thing I'm going to mention, because I'm waiting to hear what Tim Walz says, they got him talking about abortion. And he went off on that tangent about the Democrats want late term abortion. They want to abort kids after they're born. And then he just does what he does, and he goes off on another tangent, and he says Tim Walz is a radical left guy. He wants all that stuff too. So when Tim Walz hears him say that he believes in late term abortion and
Yeah,
after birth abortion, which is absolutely ridiculous, I'm looking for a response from Tim Walz, and I have a feeling it's going to be a good one.
yeah. Well, he already did. I mean, I want a T-shirt that says "Mind your own damn business."
Right.
That's he's come up with "weird" and "mind your own damn business," both of which have stuck really well, and I think that's what we're going to hear, that kind of thing. I mean, and it's true. Stop trying. He had another one that struck me. He said the guy sitting in the bar in Bemidji is not saying, we really got to ban Animal Farm, you know, and that is weird shit. I mean,
Yeah.
but that's one of the books they perennially want to ban.
Right. Right.
Animal Farm, which was basically a condemnation of communism, for God's
Right.
sake. Um, Still, what are
I
you
want
going to do?
I want a T-shirt that says "Don't make it weird." Harris Walz 2024.
There you go.
That
All
that
right.
that would work. All right, we're
Yeah.
going to wrap things up, Ed. I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day, your busy day. I know you're a
Yeah.
retired guy, but you got shit just happening everywhere. You got
Yeah.
stuff happening right now. We just don't see it.
Yeah. I think I'm going to have some soup.
Nice. Night. Well, take it easy.
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
don't jump in full. Don't go in head first on that soup because that shit can be tricky. That can be fucking tricky.
Do I
All
go
right.
with the tomato or the potato? That's the big one.
Well, it depends. It depends.
One's a little spicy, the other's more comforting.
Well, what's your A1C? That's is going to be the deciding factor because the
So,
potatoes have the starch
yeah,
and the
surprisingly
carbohydrates.
enough, I'm like, the poster boy for good health as far as that shit goes.
Really? Well, good.
Yeah.
Well, that's good because those days, those weeks that you miss, you got something going or I got something going and you miss.
Yeah.
When you get to be a certain age, people don't say, "Well, where really is he? He's just really." They go, "Is he dead? Is he dead? Did he die? Did Ed die?" No, he
Well,
didn't.
I keep getting people too wondering because I have this. It's not a lazy eye; it's a fold of skin. I've always had it, but the older I get, it gets bigger. And people going, "Did you have a stroke?" No, no. I could if I were a cosmetic surgery guy, I'd have it fixed. Maybe I could get some glue or something,
Well, it's funny
fix it.
how people pick things out. I got this dot on my nose,
Mhm.
and I know how I got it. It was like 6, 7 years ago. I'm in my 50s, and I got this zit on there, and I squeezed it, and it's kind
Yeah,
of a vascular mark. That's what my doctor says. At
yeah,
least 100 times a week, people say, "Oh, I saw that ulcer on your nose. My uncle died from that. You should get that checked out." Oh, really? I never thought of that. Fuck you. It's just ridiculous. I get people get upset when I seem annoyed when I answer it for the 50th time in a day. But we're old.
yeah,
Our faces aren't pristine like they once were. Well, mine never was, but you were a male model for a while, so or at
yeah.
least an actor. Tell folks where they can find you. I mean, it's important you check out Ed's stuff on TikTok and YouTube. It's not as much political as it is great stories, and if you like Paul Harvey and shit like that, and you're old enough to remember, it's good stuff. You need to check it out. So let them know.
You can find me on TikTok at Holler Troll. That's the at symbol, and then HOLLERTROLL. The H is capital. I don't think it matters, but at Holler HOLLER Troll TROLL.
Check it out.
Check
You
it out.
you definitely got to check it out. All right, thanks very much, Ed. For those of you listening, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day. I hope you have a great day, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.